I'm here. Oh yeah, it's so good. They're gonna be so scared. It's like, where's that?
This slide comes to you to bring to you the resolution. This house believes that exams undermine good education, and today we would like to oppose this. In my speech, I'll first go over the three contentions and show the flaw in their reasoning, and then I'll move on to two of our three contentions. Now, to start off with, they define good education as a student is prepared to work in the future and to prove their skills, right? And then they say how memorization and cramming is not a good representation of those skills. It's not a good representation of your understanding of the content. However, we find this to be a very small minority, and that the people who design exams often design it with the idea of critical thinking in mind. For example, it's sometimes in exams, you're not asked to recall a term. You're asked to recall how to use that term in a way that reflects your true understanding of the content. Yes, sure, memorization and cramming may be a topic, may be a problem of exams, but we find that this doesn't necessarily undermine a good education, as the resolution states. To their second point, they say that not everyone is a good test taker, and that you need good self-esteem in order to perform well. And because of this, however, we have two things to say in this. Number one, this is all a form of perception, and that people instead can use it to motivate themselves. And number two, when they say that they'll introduce personalized projects, what about the good test takers? You're forcing the good test takers to do projects which they may be bad at. So this argument actually works against them in this case. And then third, they talk about individual thinking, how when people take exams, they take it for the sake of the exam and not for the sake of self-education. However, because we find that exams are the only objective standard of which you can assess how well you're doing and how much of the content you know, we find that this contention is simply not be true. And now, with all of this refuted, I'll now move on to our own contentions. Now, first contention: exams are the objective standard, and they can help you motivate for self-improvement. So, what is the point of exams? Let's say you get a very bad grade on an exam. What do you first think? You might be saying, or I failed, or my future is ruined, or something like that. But it also gives you a good representation of how much you have left to learn. And this is the reason why exams are good, because it provides an objective standard of how much you must know in order to succeed. I'll take you in a moment. In order for you to go on to the future. Yes.
So if exams give you a general standard on how much you know, and then but you cram that the night before, you take the exam, you do mediocre, you do pretty good on it, and then you forget that the very next day. Is that really a good representation of what you know for the long term?
Well, we'd like to counter that by saying that although that sure, yes, some students cram, and then because of this they can manage to get good grades, but they forget what they have learned. However, we find that to be the student's responsibility for their exam, and the same problem is applicable to your idea of personalized projects. What's to say that the student will cram their personal project and know because they know how the teacher will grade this. Because exams are objective in their standard, not subjective as projects are, we find that they're to be much more better for the purpose of self-improvement and to see how well you're doing. It's because motivate cramming and forgetting what you learned is not mutually exclusive. It is on both sides of this house. And so now moving on, I would also like to elaborate by saying how because exams measure how well you're doing, you can see how much more you have to study, how much more you have to do for the next exam. And this is even elaborated even further in countries in East Asia where they release rankings. Rankings form a form of health competition between people. I'd also like to give a historical example. Han China, which is arguably the best bureaucratic society in the world, had a thorough bureaucratic exam which led China to be a global world power. So now moving on to the second of our contentions. Exams provide materials and skill applicable in the workforce. So what do exams actually teach you? Well, number one, as we mentioned before, exams are an objective standard of how much you must know in order for you to succeed in a subject. But exams also teach you deadlines and punctuality, and how you must prepare for external pressures which would inevitably be apparent in the workforce. We would like to again emphasize how exams are not career threatening. Let's say you do really well in all your personal projects, but where does that leave you for your future career? In your future career, if you fail one of those projects, it's like game over, right? And so we find that exams, although yes, if you fail an exam, it may harm your overall experience of education, because it provides external pressure in a non-career threatening way. We find that this to be an extremely good tool in order for you to improve your perception of how much you must work. Yes.
So the opposition keeps talking about how personalized projects could also be done the night before the deadline. But then you also talk about how these exams give deadlines and external pressure. So isn't that basically the same thing as our personalized projects and these exams basically talk about the same thing?
The proposition seems to be mistaken here. We, on the side of opposition, are not against personalized projects. The topic here is not about whether personalized projects are better than exams. We are talking about whether exams undermine a good education, and we, the opposition, are here to prove that they do not. We're saying that the personalized projects, because they do not provide an objective standard for how much you must learn and how much you need to motivate, how much you must, and they don't give an assessment on how much you must work in order to succeed. We find that this to be that personalized projects lack what exams have, and because they define good education as someone who's prepared to work in the future and prepared to prove their skills, we find that exams as an objective standard must be apparent.
Mr. Speakers, I'm going to use the exact criteria that the opposition side gave to us, the government side gave to us in the beginning of this debate. What is ultimately a good education? They gave us 3 criteria, and we'll use this exact criteria to prove exactly why our case ultimately prevails at the end of the day. First, they talked about the student's future. Second, about understanding the content. And then third, about proving their skills to other institutions that they are worthy. I'll use these exact criteria to prove to you as to why our case is ultimately stronger and ultimately more beneficial to the students at the end of the day. I'll be doing a few things very clear in my speech. First, I'll go over some refutation based on everything they said about their alternatives, about personal projects, and about how this stress mentally deteriorates students. And then second, I'll go over our own reconstructed points about how, first, we think that as exams, it is objective, which cannot be imitated by personal projects. Second, about how it prepares you for the workforce. And third, about mastery of topics. So, first of all, they talked about memorizing and cramming. This has been a recurring theme within their case about how memorizing and cramming destroys students. 2 responses. First of all, we think that this is not mutually exclusive to projects as well. We think that individuals can postpone their projects and procrastinate. We think that there's no difference at all for their alternative. But second of all, we think that more importantly, when people make exams, they don't make exams to say like, oh, okay, now we have to make students memorize and cram. We have to make them suffer. That is not what these exam makers do. That is not their intention. When they make exams, they want students to strategically think, how can we exploit the flaws within this exam, right? For example, the SAT. The SAT is designed to gather data. And as data, there's a certain algorithm to how the SAT is constructed. And therefore, the SAT doesn't really encourage students to memorize and cram. The SAT encourages students to think strategically or logically. And we think that even in school, or even in academics, teachers don't, no teacher on this planet encourages students to cram the night before. Every single teacher says, as everyone, most people in this room have heard, do not cram before the day of the test. Start studying 2 weeks before, right? There's a reason to that. If you do it 2 weeks before, if you do it effectively, it is incredibly effective to one's education. You learn how to respect deadlines. You learn how to master the topic, and you ultimately don't have to memorize and cram. Even if some kind of malevolent teacher out there says memorize and cram, we think that students, if they aren't completely an airhead, they'll learn to know that memorizing and cramming is not an efficient way. That is also part of a good education. Learning what kinds of methods are effective and learning what kinds of methods are ineffective. This is also a part of a good education. We think that exams also teach that as well. And then second of all, they talk about how not everyone is a good test taker. Yes, not every single person on this planet, not every single person who goes to school is an excellent test taker. But however, we don't believe that necessarily undermines a good education. For example, if you, for the first time you take a test, you get a 30, right? At least, even if initially you may be in despair, you at least know exactly where you are and where you want to go. You can have a certain goal which you want to reach. Okay, I have a 30, I want to get at least a 65 in the next test, right? No thanks, no thank you. So at least on our side of the house, we have some kind of goal that students can strive themselves to, right? They talk about Korea, a very extreme example. We think that in this case of Korea, yes, exams stress students out, but it's not really the structural nature of exams that stress students out, right? Exams are administered around the world everywhere. Is everyone committing suicide and jumping off cliffs? No. We think that in terms of Korea, it is how they administer tests, not what the tests are in their nature. We don't think that tests are structurally flawed. We think that in terms of Korea, the way they administer tests, the method, that is the one that's flawed.
Could you clarify?
Yes.
Could you clarify what you mean? How do Korean teachers, how do Korean educations, teach the students?
Okay. So basically, in Korean education, we don't think this is very important. But if we had to stress, we think that they put this all of your education on the KSAT, the Suneung, or like the national exam you have to take, there's only one chance, and if you don't do well on that test, then your life is pretty much over. We don't think that this is what tests should be. We think that there should be multiple times you can take this test, multiple chances, right? But in Korea, there's no such thing. So therefore, we think that is an anomaly in this type of sense. Second, they talk about not everyone is a good test taker. No, thank you, sir. But first of all, we think that this can be turned around, right? Because if you initially, they talk about how you have no confidence, you lose self-esteem. But however, once you get there, once you defeat that test, once you overcome that test and overcome your limits and learn and master the topic, we think that, no thank you ma'am, we think that actually that brings much more self-confidence. That you know that you master this topic, that you conquer this test. We think that brings so much more self-confidence, even if initially you may be inspired. And then third, they talk about individual thinking. First of all, we don't think that this is mutually exclusive. We think that exams have ways to implement ways and questions to test critical thinking, right? Not every single test out there is going to be like, okay, what's 1 plus 1? What's 2 plus 1? Right? We think that there are critical ways to assess people's mathematical skills, historical skills, scientific investigation skills, whatever kind of skills. We think that there are questions designed to test and pull the depths of creativity from one's mind. We don't think that exams don't do that at all. And finally, I want to talk about this idea of projects. First of all, the main difference between projects, mind you, we don't not support projects. The main difference between projects is that in projects, if an individual feels like they did their best, they're like, okay, I can't do any better, right? But when you take an objective test, there is something you can do better. There are a certain amount of points you could have gotten more. It's an objective and clear way to see where you are and where you can improve. With projects, it is incredibly blurry and hard and to see in which parts of the project you could have done better. But on a test, it's very clear for an individual to see how much they had to improve. Now let's move on into our points. First of all, let's talk about the value of tests and its objectivity. As you've already told you, as tests are objective, it's a good way to see where you are. But furthermore, we think that it's a good way to see you are and if you're in the right place. The reason why colleges ask you for your scores, the reason why high schools ask you for your scores, is because they want to see if you're in the right place, if this institution is truly right for you, if you're going to suffer in this institution or you're going to do extremely well. We think that test scores can be a way to attest to that. We think that test scores can put you at the right place where you can flourish the most. And we think that constitutes to a good education. Second, punctuality and work ethic. Why do we think that this is important? In terms of projects, yes, projects are so much more lenient than tests, right? Tests have external pressures. You have to take in a room where everyone else is doing the same test. There are pressures. And guess what? Society has pressure as well. Even more, titanic amounts of pressure that you have to overcome, right? And we think that training individuals, training students from a very young age to try to overcome this fear or anxiety of pressure, to perform well despite time constraints. We think that these are very valuable skills that individuals can use later on in their life. And we think that these are very vital skills that they have to do. We think that is a unique benefit of tests. Finally, we want to talk about mastery of topics. We think that the most basic premise of why you go to school, why you ought to go to take an education, is to learn about your passions and learn about what you want to study, right? However, we think that tests, unlike projects, tests are the most straightforward way to allow individuals to improve, to allow individuals to master their study of science, their studies as much as they can, right? We think that not only it gives you room to improve, once you get there, you've completely mastered the topic, right? In terms of like the LSAT or the MCAT, right? In order to gain these significant positions, you have to prove that you can think logically, or you know how certain biology works or how chemistry works. We think that you have to show this mastery, and you can get this mastery because the MCAT shows, okay, this is what we expect out of you. The LSAT shows, this is what we expect out of you, and you can learn to master these topics on like projects which are very important. At the end of the day, we ultimately stand for a good education. What is a good education? Like they said, prepare students for the future, understand the topics, and improve their skills.
A good education, in their words, is someone who is prepared for the future to think critically and to apply their skills and what they learn in the real world. Now, let's see why our side of the house is much better than theirs. And in their side of the house, in their best world, they have personalized projects and no stress of exams. We find this to be a very opposite of a good education because the real world, as a good education is supposed to prepare you for, is filled with stress and pressures you can't necessarily always cram for, and which again, as mentioned, it was not mutually exclusive. But continuing on, they also talk about self-esteem and self-thinking. And what is this doing? It is molding the education to fit the students, whereas the students are the ones who must adapt to the education in order for them to succeed in the real world. They mentioned how if you have personalized projects, that students will be able to feel less stressed, and that they will be able to actually own their education, and that they will be more motivated. Well, we find that a lack of motivation is on both sides of the house, and therefore that we should at least try to bring students up to a standard which society knows that they can be proficient in. That this is the definition of a good education. And now, if we take a look at our side of the house, in our worst world, students are stressed out about their tests, but they at least have a chance to prove themselves again and again. Their point about South Korea does not fail because that's only one-time test. So, because they fail to ignore and we fail to properly refute and give a proper alternative to the self-improvement based on an objective standard, which exams constitute, how they fail to show how personalized projects will help you improve your work ethic and your force. If you have no objective standard, why should you be motivated to improve? And because they fail to show like how they would measure mastery of the topic, how they would show how you have reached the final end goal, how you have shown that you are proficient in society, and because they fail to do all these things, which is their definition of good education, we find that we must take this.